This morning's sermon's going to be a little bit of a charcuterie board of ideas here. So if you're, I just want to manage your expectations from the outset, that if you're looking for a straight through line, the straight through line is Christmas. So we're going to start here, and if younger ones want to make sure they can see, I got excited about this, and I decided it was good for everyone. So here you go, captive audience and all. So, as we gather here on Christmas, the first Sunday of Christmas, there is also another name for today, which would be the first day of Christmas. Does anybody know how many days are in Christmas? 12. It's almost like there's a song, right? Yeah, so Christmas is actually just beginning. We're at the very front end of it. So it didn't begin on like July 4th or on Labor Day. It did not begin at Thanksgiving even. It did not begin when the Christmas tree lot opened up down the street from you. It began at sunset last night. Now, the same people that were telling you that it started months ago are going to tell you that it's over today. What I'm here to tell you is that Christmas belongs to Christians, and we're just getting started. It does not belong to the supermarket. It does not belong to the stores. So, this is an update from last Sunday. I know this is a nail-biter. You might not know all of the figures here. But there was great concern last week when we had an empty cradle and no baby. But today, we have a baby. Now, we also have shepherds and sheep who have joined for, that's not a sheep, but you get the idea. It probably belongs in the stable. We've got the sheep over here. But what I wanted to show you is, for some reason, I must have missed one of them at home. This is 2/3 of the amazing trio known as the wise men. They don't go here. I'm going to put them over here. So these guys, they're not going to get over here for another 11 days. How many days in Christmas? 12, right? So 11 days. So if you are one of these people that heard on the radio that Christmas is over and your tree is already half packed by the time you got here this morning, please leave one nativity set out. Have it set up, everything's happening, and put the wise men somewhere else. And over the next 11 days, they can move through your home over to this as we celebrate the full and entire season of Christmas. One of the things that I realized is that over the last generation or two, particularly in the United States, the church has largely given over the teaching about the traditions and the meaning of Christmas to corporate and capitalist institutions. They have different figures to talk about at this time of year so that we don't have to talk about Jesus. But I remember in my home in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, my mom had one of these things that felt super cliche at the time. It was this little sporty kind of slogan thing on a piece of wood. You could probably buy it just about anywhere. It said, "Jesus is the reason for the season." And it turns out where this sign comes from is the fact that Jesus is the reason for the season. That's why. Christmas, Christ, Mass, here we are celebrating Mass, celebrating the birth of Christ. So I would encourage you, in our culture, there are forces that every year seek to squeeze this into the smallest corner or to make it disappear entirely. Fight back against that. Create space for the Christian Christmas message. It is desperately important, particularly because of the kind of culture that we live in, where for us to survive or succeed, the sense is that that has to cost someone else something. When we gather during this season and celebrate Christmas, we are at the shortest days of the year. Now, we have part of our crew in from Minnesota, Berlin, even further north. We have all kinds of places where the days get very, very short at this time of year. And for us, it's kind of that fun time when the Christmas lights all come on and we celebrate all of that kind of business, and that's great. But oftentimes, darkness can be scary at times. Some of you perhaps heard the news this last week about the massive fuel crisis in Iran. The lights are just about out in the entire nation. Industries shut down because they're needing to make choices between heating fuel for homes or heating fuel to make electricity. So they've stopped making electricity. It's dark in Iran. Very dark. Can you imagine that? This sense of darkness, and a sense also of the forces that got us to this spot. Are they capable of getting us out of this spot? Is there a sense of hope in what might come from that? Or is there a sense of fear and despair? This morning's news from Eastern Europe was another wave of attacks in Ukraine, not against soldiers, not even really against people, but against infrastructure of utilities. Now, I'm not an expert on Ukraine, but I know that at this time of year, it's cold, right? And now there is less opportunity for heat. In a place where the days are short, the houses are cold. Is there a sense of hope? There are forces at play that say, for me to succeed, you have to lose. My success comes at your expense. When we move through these days of Christmas, I think one of the things that I'd like you to remember beyond the Jesus is the reason for the season piece is the idea that God has come among us to teach us a different way of living. A way of living that isn't at the expense of our neighbor, or at the expense of the next generation, or at the expense of our employees. Who knows whose cost it is? But Jesus does something different in arriving as a baby. Think of all those dark places in our minds. Maybe it's an exam room at the medical clinic waiting for your doctor to come in with the results from your last test. Maybe it's a memo that your supervisor wants to speak to your department early in the new year. Maybe it's a letter from the school that you were hoping to get into, that you had applied to. There are all kinds of moments and spaces where we are fearful and without hope. And in the midst of that, God does not send a mighty warrior, the richest person in the world, an amazing cure. God sends an infant. An infant. It's almost as if God doesn't understand the problem. This is not what I wanted. Remember, as a kid, you might have had a list of the presents that you wanted and you got something else and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted. How many times have you been in a space in your life where you've laid awake at night, stressed about something, and thought, a baby would fix all of this? Has that ever crossed your mind? Yes. I think one of the things, though, when I think of God coming among us as one of us, and not as muscle-bound, strapping, but coming as a defenseless child, is remembering some of the first times that I held an infant myself. I remember, I want to say I was in high school or college, because I remember, aside from maybe some time when I was 3 and my parents propped me with a cousin or something for a photo. I don't remember that. But where I had to stand and hold the child for the first time. This was not like holding a cup of coffee or a football or something like this. There was a much greater sense that dropping this would be bad. It moved independently, which was unnerving. But one of the things that I distinctly remember is that there is no room in your head for any other task than holding that child. That takes up the whole universe. The world gets small really fast. Now, as you move on, you can get handy with a kid. You can do all kinds of things while holding a child. But I think God coming to us as an infant, we should be remembering those moments when it first felt awkward and our inability to do anything else. In our world, when we open our hearts and arms to the child Christ coming to us, there is no more ability to work at someone else's expense for our personal benefit. There is no extra arm to wield a sword over our neighbor. All of those things pass to the wayside. Suddenly, our survival, our ability to thrive diminishes against this tiny package, which must be kept safe at all cost. The world shrinks radically. As we go through these days, we're just getting started. Jesus is the reason for the season. God comes to us not with power and force over others, but rather as a baby to consume our whole world so that we might learn to bring love in the darkness, perhaps particularly when we are most afraid, trusting that wherever we are, Christ has come among us as one of us. Amen. I'm going to throw people off my usual cues here. I wanted to say one thing about this hymn. I do this most years because I love this hymn. So if you look at page 5, Hymn of the Day, and get on your great reading glasses to look at the fine print at the bottom, we are singing a tune from the 13th century. We are singing words that were written in the late 300s. We as a people have joined this song for almost untold generations. We're joining in something that is entirely beyond us, that we are a small piece of, a long legacy of love. Please stand as you are able.